So Valerie is an 11-year veteran from the U.S. military. She's from a small town in Texas. And, like all of us, she's a human being. She's not a perfect person. But she is a really wonderful person. She dedicated her life to her country, her education, to improving herself. And she's somebody who works really hard. She was working 50, 60 hours a week to make $40,000 a year. And she's somebody I really cared about. She was my hiking partner. And her and I were on a hike. And she was telling me, after her and I going through her expenses and looking at everything and trying to figure out if there was some way that she could create a more financially stable life for herself, her and I were on a hike when she gave me some horrible news, which was that a $200 rent increase was throwing upside down her entire apple cart that she had finally gotten together. And that was so upsetting to me, and I was so angry at the system, I was angry at her boss, I was angry at everybody I could think of. And then I realized an inconvenient truth, which was a third of the people working at my company, Gravity Payments, were making less than Valerie was making.
Picture your boss walking into the office one day and saying, "Hey Bob, I'm doubling your salary." It may sound unreal, but this is exactly what happened at Gravity Payment. This is Dan Price, the founder of Gravity Payment and the man who proved against all odds that employees' relationship with their boss can be a lot more positive than we often imagine. In the corporate world, the relationship between employees and employers is often fraught with tension. Most business owners try as much as possible to get the best out of their staff while also trying as much as possible to pay them the bare minimum. This creates an atmosphere where workers begin to see their bosses as almost like a villain in a workplace. It's a common dynamic, and for many employees, this is the reality they expect. But Dan Price is the man who challenged this entire notion. Price founded Gravity Payment in 2004 from his dorm room at just 19. He wasn't a typical CEO. He had a different vision, one that would redefine what leadership could look like. His elder brother offered him a seed capital, which is that initial investment that can help the business in taking care of initial expenses such as renting office space, paying employees, and other daily expenses. Fast forward to 2015, almost 10 years later, Dan Price announced a minimum salary of $70,000 for all employees at Gravity Payment.
What I wanted to announce today is we're going to have a minimum $70,000 pay rate for everyone that works here.
A bold and almost a reckless move, some might say.
So Dan, tell me, what made you do this?
Going back to when I started, all I could afford to pay that first person that decided to work with me was $24,000 a year and no health care or anything. And so ever since then, I've been trying to work on getting better pay, getting better wages. It's always been on my mind, but there's a question of could the company afford it? And so I finally got to a place where we were successful enough that I felt like we might be able to pull it off.
We're not talking about just a raise, we're talking about a pretty big bump. Where did you come up with the math? Why did you decide on the level you decided?
So there's a 2010 Princeton study that I'm a huge fan of that basically says up to around $70,000, $75,000, every extra dollar you make has an impact on your happiness, because making less than that actually has an impact on your emotional health. And dollars over that don't really do anything. So you can maybe get more luxuries or things that you don't need, but your basics are covered once you get to that point. And my team is very much passionate, and I don't want them to be distracted with money. So I thought, what's the amount of money that they have to make at a minimum to not be distracted and just to focus on their work?
But Price's announcement wasn't met with cheers from the business community. In fact, quite the opposite happened. Critics from all corners, financial expert, business mogul, warned that this decision will lead to disaster. How could a company possibly survive such a dramatic salary increase without falling into bankruptcy?
Have you seen the CEO of the Seattle-based company who raised the minimum wage at his credit card processing company to $70,000 per year?
Lunatic of all lunatics, Dan Price, CEO of Gravity Payment.
I hope this company is a case study in MBA programs on how socialism does not work, because it's going to fail.
Thoughts on this guy? Personally, I think he's a socialist, but
This is the man who's doing it. Are you a socialist?
Well, look, I don't support a minimum wage increase because it's a job killer, but he's a private business owner. If he wants to do this in between hugging trees.
I have a hunch we're going to know Dan Price for a really long time. But the 130 employees of Gravity Payments, I think they're going to be on the welfare line soon.
I have to say, Eric, I think he's pretty foolish.
Despite the overwhelming critics and dire predictions, Price doubled down on his decision. See, Dan Price was putting his salary on the line. He slashed his own income by nearly $1 million to make this possible. Can you imagine the CEO of a major company cutting their salary to benefit the employees? This was practically unheard of. Dan Price was taking a leap of faith that only few will ever dare. Will it work? Will the company thrive or crumble under the weight of this unprecedented decision? For Gravity Payment employees, it was a dream come true. Suddenly, their lives changed because the minimum salary of $70,000 meant that the salary of some employees would be double. But this was no joke. For 120 employees at Gravity Payment, this was their new reality. Their trust and loyalty towards Dan Price skyrocketed, and they love working at Gravity Payment. And as for the company, it didn't just survive. It grew in terms of productivity within workers. Some employees were now able to buy a house. Some were able to start a family and plan vacation.
We have a CEO who made a stunning announcement on employee pay. This was more than 6 years ago when we first told you about it. 2015, Dan Price is his name. He raised the salary of everyone at his Seattle credit card processing company to at least $70,000 a year. Price's decision was met with predictions of bankruptcy from his worst critics, but we're here to tell you now that has not happened. Instead, the company is actually thriving, and as Carter Evans shows us, the higher pay has helped employees buy homes and start families.
You weren't the only ones that had a baby, huh?
No, everybody had a baby.
So it's a baby boom here. Why do you think that's happening?
We can afford it.
They both work at Gravity Payments in Seattle, a credit card processing company with a CEO who 6 years ago did something that shocked everyone.
And we're going to have a minimum $70,000 pay rate for everyone that works here.
You had people making $35,000 a year, but you told them you were going to double their salary.
Yeah.
And then you actually had to do it.
Right.
How did you pull it off?
Well, it's tricky. You know, I took the $1 million pay cut.
That's right, $1 million pay cut. Dan Price was simultaneously hailed as a hero and eviscerated as an enemy of capitalism.
Lunatic of all lunatics, Dan Price.
Personally, I think he's a socialist.
I hope this company is a case study in MBA programs because it's going to fail.
But that didn't happen.
So you've almost doubled the number of employees, and you've tripled business.
Yeah.
And you're still paying a minimum of $70,000 a year.
Correct.
And Gravity Payment continues to thrive. His employees being grateful for the leadership and what Dan has done for them, say for months to surprise him with a brand new Tesla in 2016, an extraordinary gesture of loyalty and gratitude. Almost when it seems like a perfect happy ending, COVID-19 came. Now, COVID-19 shook the entire global economy, and Gravity Payment wasn't immune to this. The company lost a lot of clients, and like many businesses, it seems like layoffs or pay cuts was inevitable. Yet just when you expect employees to jump ship or demand their full salary, something remarkable happened.
Best boss in America. He cut his own salary and paid all his workers a minimum of $70,000 a year. We all remember that. Now, as Price's company Gravity Payments faces an uncertain future amid this pandemic, those employees are now giving back. Jonathan Bigliotti shows us how they're taking voluntary pay cuts.
We had 98% of the employees offer to take a pay cut.
That's got to be inspiring to you.
It's humbling. It's probably the proudest moment of my life as a leader, but it's also the most humbling.
Dan Price says his employees at Gravity Payments, a credit card processing company for small businesses, offered not just a cut, but big cuts. 30%, 50%. Some even offered to work for free. Price wouldn't let them, but he does say their sacrifice meant no one will be laid off.
They volunteered to take pay cuts. They weren't just loyal to Dan Price, they believed in him. They wanted to see the company survive even if it meant personal sacrifices. So the company survived the COVID-19 wave thanks to the very employees Dan Price had supported years earlier. He had already shown them that they were valued, truly valued. Even though Dan Price eventually stepped down as CEO, his story is a powerful model for what business leadership can be. It doesn't always have to be a zero-sum game. It can be a win-win. Dan Price didn't just build a company, he built a relationship, one where both employees and the business won. The question is, how many other businesses are brave enough to follow his lead?
This has gone viral. You're putting a lot of pressure on other CEOs out there. What is your message to them? Do you think this is something that other companies can do, should do?
So my message is, think about what's the right thing for you to do. Because with leadership, there's a moral imperative to lead and to do the right thing for those that you're leading. But it's different for everybody. When I started, I couldn't afford to do this. And I've actually gotten many letters and emails from other CEOs saying, I'm gonna follow suit, or I'm working so hard every day in my business because I want to be able to do something like this for my team someday. So I really do think it'll inspire people, and I think we're gonna start seeing a reversal of this inequality trend.